I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, hundreds of cars trapped in mud, the drivers who were caught off guard by the Southern California storm.
Tickled pink, the scientists tracking a pink dye project off the coast of San Diego and what they may learn about dirty waters. I'm Amita Sharma. Also, another look at the boots on the ground in Afghanistan following the president's announcement to delay the troop drawdown.
Students caught in the middle of a labor dispute at CSU campuses, the debate over pay that may have professors walking off the job. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. Building bridges, not walls. That's what Mexico's former president says the U.S. needs to do. Vicente Fox addressed an energy summit today in San Diego. KPBS Fronteras reporter Jean Guerrero was there.
Vicente Fox gave the final keynote address at the Border Energy Forum, an annual meeting of key players in the U.S. and Mexico energy industries. He touched on everything from trade to politics. In an exclusive interview with KPBS, he discussed his thoughts on Republican presidential hopeful Donald Trump, who has proposed building a 2,000-mile fence between the two countries.
You don't build walls. That's just stupid, building walls. You build bridges. You build partnerships like we have, Canada, United States, and Mexico. And we benefit all three together.
He said the Energy Forum is an example of that bridge building. It focused on increasing cross-border collaboration on energy needs, including renewables. Fox also discussed immigration trends, his support for drug legalization, and more. You can find more of our interview with him online at kpbs.org. Jean Guerrero, KPBS News.
Thousands of vehicles stranded after flash flooding and mudslides caused a traffic nightmare on Southern California roadways. North and southbound lanes of the Grapevine opened today after several feet of mud blocked it off. Associated Press reporter Sandy Kozel says the storm kept first responders busy with rescues and cleanups.
A sudden rainstorm in the Los Angeles area sent flash floods, mud and rocks across roads and stranded thousands of vehicles. Some of the worst conditions are about 75 miles north of Los Angeles, where on Thursday a huge flow of mud and rocks shut down Interstate 5, a major freeway that connects Northern and Southern California.
Next thing you know, boulders are just coming down the mountain and we just can't see, and it was just really crazy. 5
feet of mud covers the freeway in some areas, and officials say it could take up to a day to reopen all lanes.
And all we're doing is we're turning people around at the bottom of the Grapevine.
So that means you're not going north or south?
You're not going north or south at the moment.
It was also especially rough going for drivers around Lake Hughes in northern Los Angeles County. The Los Angeles County Fire Department says it rescued 4 people and 2 dogs from on top of one car. Drivers said the storm took them by surprise.
And so we're just heading back, and then a couple cars ahead of us were stuck, and then we got out, saw the land caved all over the road.
Firefighters praised drivers who managed to stay in safe areas.
They did the right thing by not trying to cross those mud debris flows with their vehicles. They truly did the right thing. They stayed in a safe area, a high spot, which is what we would like the public to do.
There were no immediate reports of deaths or injuries. The storm system is expected to move eastward through Friday. Sandy Kozel, The Associated Press.
A wage dispute may have teachers at San Diego State and Cal State San Marcos walking off the job. Faculty members at the 23 CSU campuses will vote next week on whether or not to strike. They want a 5% raise in pay. This comes after the university received an extra $97 million in state funding. University officials have denied the faculty's requests for the raises. CSU employs 25,000 faculty members. They say it's been years since they've gotten a significant raise in pay.
Because we have not had raises, anything substantial, for 7 years. And even before that, the raises were, if you look at a 10-year average of what faculty have earned, we haven't kept up with inflation.
The faculty union will begin voting on Monday, continuing for 10 days until the last week of this month. San Diego is leading the way for fresh fish sales at open markets. California Assembly Speaker Tony Atkins at the Tuna Harbor Market today celebrating a new law. It allows other communities to have fish markets of their own. The Pacific to Plate bill makes it easier to set up and monitor fish markets. Atkins says a permanent law regulating the businesses makes them safer.
That's part of why it had to be done in code to ensure consumer protections, public safety, and that's why the County of San Diego is involved. So there is a link, much like there are with farmers markets. You have to go through a process. Once you do, yes, there's safety inspections, all of that happens.
Atkins expects other California cities to open fish markets now that they are legal. Tracking pink tainted waves off the coast of San Diego, the project may help scientists learn more about pollution along the coast. Amita Sharma has more on what else they hope to discover.
If you're seeing pink at the beach at the U.S.-Mexico border, it's not your imagination. Researchers from Scripps Institution of Oceanography are conducting a novel experiment using pink dye to gauge water quality. Falk Feddersen, a project leader and Scripps professor, joins me to talk about the experiment. Professor Feddersen, where exactly is this pink dye being injected into the ocean, and what is the purpose?
Well, we did a series of 3 dye release experiments, and we injected this pink rhodamine dye into 3 different locations on each experiment. So one of them most recently was in the mouth of the Tijuana River estuary, and another one was north, closer to the Silver Strand State Beach, and another one was directly within the city limits of Imperial Beach.
And what exactly do you hope to find?
Well, what we want to do is this is a region that has impacted water quality. If it rains, it's a really bad idea to go into the water there. So what we want to do by putting in this pink rhodamine dye, which is EPA approved and FDA approved for use in drinking reservoirs.
So it's safe.
It's safe, yes. It's safe for humans and it's safe for the marine ecosystem. But we think of it as sort of like fake pollution. And what we can do then is we inject it in and we can track it. We have a whole range of instruments to track it. We have a plane flying that can image it. We have underwater robots that are driving around tracking it. We have people on jet skis that have special instruments to measure it. And so by tracking this whole plume, then we can understand how it gets transported and how it gets diluted.
And you said that the water isn't great after it rains there, but what specifically are the conditions of the water in that area? How bad does it get?
Well, it can get really, really bad after a significant rainstorm. By far the worst place in San Diego County. And this is just due to a confluence of things that are happening in the border region because of some cross-border flows and things like that.
And how quickly do you expect to see results of this kind of testing?
Well, we are going to be giving a series of presentations at the next big oceanographic meeting in February of next year. And we're going to be giving presentations down to the stakeholders like the City of Imperial Beach or the Tijuana River Estuary Research Reserve, Wild Coast, and other NGOs, and the Navy, which has a significant presence down there.
So who came up with the idea to use this pink dye for this kind of experiment?
Well, this is sort of like an evolution of a series of studies that we've done. In 2006 in Huntington Beach, we threw pink dye into the water, but we only studied how it moved over a few hundred yards. And then in 2009, we did another experiment in Imperial Beach where we studied how it moved just over about half a mile, maybe almost a mile. And in this study, we're trying to understand how it moves over 6 to 10 miles. So one of the releases we did, there was a plume that was stretched out 10 kilometers, which is 6 miles, from the Imperial Beach Pier all the way up almost to Coronado.
And so for these previous experiments, even though they were for smaller areas, yes, how successful were the experiments in terms of telling you, giving you information?
They have been extremely successful. So we've learned a lot about how the dye dilutes very close to its dye source. But the way dye dilutes very close to its dye source and the way pollution would dilute close to the source is different than how it dilutes further away from the source. So as you get further away from the source, different types of currents and different sorts of mixing processes are causing the dilution.
And how do you expect the results of this experiment to be used?
Well, our hope is that that in the long-term plan is sort of in 5 years that we would be able to have a numerical model, a computer model that you could look up onto a website, and you could see if it had rained, how much pollution was going into the estuary or other sources, and where it's going to go, and if it's going to go more down to Tijuana or more towards the north, and basically also be able to make predictions so that if you live in Chula Vista, for example, and you want to go to Silver Strand or you want to go to Borderfield State Park, you can look up and you can see, oh, what are the water quality conditions going to be?
And for what other purposes do you envision this experiment or this type of pink dye being used?
Well, there's also many other things where it could be used. So, for example, inside the estuary, there's a number of crabs and snails and these kinds of animals that release little eggs, little larvae that get ejected out of the estuary, and they get fertilized, and then eventually these animals have to come back. And the same thing happens with all these crabs and things that live inside the beach. So when you see birds pecking into the beach, they're looking for clams and crabs and stuff. They all release larvae that go far offshore, and they have to come back to the beach. And so this is not just for pollution, but it's for understanding how all sorts of types of biological properties make their way from the coast, offshore, and back on.
Fascinating. Falk Feddersen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Cash in, cash out. Senate candidate Kamala Harris leads her rivals in campaign funds raised, but spends them as fast as they come in. The California Attorney General spent nearly 75% of funds raised last summer in the race to replace Senator Barbara Boxer. Her closest rival, fellow Democrat Loretta Sanchez, pulled in $400,000 for next year's race. San Diego Assemblyman Rocky Chavez is falling behind on campaign funds. The Republican raised nearly $18,000. Don't be fooled by the new California jobs report out today showing statewide unemployment falling below 6% for the first time in nearly a decade. The unemployment rate in San Diego hit 4.6% last month, which was lower than numbers recorded in August. The city's professional, scientific, and technical sector saw the biggest gains with 9,600 positions. Economists say California failed to add any new jobs last month, and more than 100,000 people stopped looking for work. United Airlines shares fell today after news its CEO was hospitalized. Wall Street Journal says 56-year-old Oscar Munoz suffered a heart attack, but the airline gave no explanation or details of his condition. Munoz was named CEO of United Continental last month. The company merged with Continental Airlines in 2010. But its on-time performance has lagged behind its biggest competitors, American, Delta, and Southwest. United stock fell more than 3% today. Powering up from the sun, the city of San Diego looking at a plan to install 25 solar power panels, replacing electricity otherwise purchased from SDG&E. City staff say the cost of purchasing power from the utility over the next 20 years would be $48 million compared to $26 million from the solar panels. The city will review the plan at a meeting scheduled for next week. Hundreds more electric vehicles will cruise California roads. Corporate and government leaders announced yesterday Navy and Marine Corps bases will get 450 of the zero pollution vehicles, and large companies like Coca-Cola also promise similar goals. State officials have the high goal of getting 1 million such vehicles on the road by 2025. Such large commitments have urged the California Air Resources Board to increase the number of charging stations. Bike Riders Unite, a two-wheeled posse with the County Bike Coalition, will roll through Coronado this weekend to urge support for additional bike lanes in a city once honored for its bicycle friendliness.
You are covering Coronado with paint stripe pollution.
That comment from a neighbor last month objecting to the City Council's plan for 12 more miles of bike paths in Coronado. The city won a national award for accommodating bike riders just 2 years ago.
They have been accepting of it. That's part of the goals of their bike master plan is to help with traffic congestion, to help with the environmental concerns that automobile traffic brings.
Andy Henshaw with the nonprofit County Bicycle Coalition is urging peddlers of all ages to join them in a show of force Saturday morning at the Coronado Ferry Landing. The group wants City Council to move forward with its master plan, recently suspended after complaints from neighbors about how the bike lanes would look.
Coronado can be congested, and this would help ease that congestion. In addition, we know that bikes bring business to small businesses in particular. And, you can see that when tourists ride around there. When visitors come over on the ferry, they go over there to spend money.
It's also an issue of safety, where 70% of the students in Coronado walk or bike to school. And over the last several years, there were more than 800 collisions between bicycles and cars. The mayor plans to put the issue before voters next year.
And we think it makes sense to add more bike safety enhancements to attract more bicycle riders that will help everybody on the roadway.
The Bike Coalition ride departs from the Coronado Ferry Landing at 10:15 tomorrow morning. A genome editing tool alters genes in plants and animals is being described as a game changer in the world of biology. As Associated Press reporter Ned Barker explains, scientists are worried about others abusing the technology.
Buddy Cassidy has been suffering from Duchenne muscular dystrophy since birth. The 26-year-old literature buff and Shakespeare fan needs a scooter to get around because the disease, which is genetic, attacks the muscles.
I have bad days and I have good days, and sometimes I'm a little angry.
Scientists are now exploring new ways to treat inherited diseases like Cassidy's. In labs across the country, they're working with a new tool that can precisely edit genes inside living cells. It's a genome editing tool called CRISPR-Cas9, and it's being described as a game changer.
I like to call it a molecular scalpel for cells. It allows scientists to make a very precise change in the DNA of a cell or organism that could do something like correct a mutation that would otherwise cause disease.
Jennifer Doudna, a molecular biologist at UC Berkeley, was one of the scientists who developed it.
It's a technology that just allows a level of precision that we haven't had in the past.
Now it's being used in laboratories across the country in plant and animal research. Scientists have their eye on using it for everything from coming up with cures for blood disorders like sickle cell disease to combating antibiotic-resistant superbugs. At this laboratory outside Washington, scientists are using it on zebrafish to knock out genes that cause deafness.
The technology is moving very fast. It's almost every scientist is interested in the concept of genome engineering has shifted to using these techniques because they work so well.
Harvard University scientists are even using the tool on mosquitoes with dreams of eliminating malaria. But the rapid embrace of the technology also has scientists concerned.
Just because we can build a CRISPR gene drive to spread a trait through the wild population does not mean that we should.
A top concern, editing so-called germline cells, meaning human sperm, eggs, and embryos, where DNA changes could then be passed down from one generation to the next.
A permanent change to the DNA of the cell is something that you can't easily go back and reverse.
With clinical trials likely before long, the National Academy of Sciences will host a critical conference in December to focus on the technology's future.
I would like to see a consensus built around how we should handle the challenges posed by CRISPR and other potentially extremely powerful technologies relating to biology.
The Academy plans to issue a report next year. While there's no guarantee about what the gene editing tool could do for those suffering from muscular dystrophy, just hearing about the scientific progress gives Cassidy and his family comfort.
To be able to say that your child has this, but we can do something to fix it, can't even describe that feeling.
And hope for future generations. Ned Barker, The Associated Press.
When President Obama leaves office in 15 months, he'll hand his successor military conflicts in two countries, Afghanistan and Iraq. Amitha Sharma takes a closer look at what may be next for the boots on the ground.
In 2008, then-candidate Barack Obama said he would be the president who led the U.S. out of the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. But in Afghanistan, the Taliban and other extremist groups have regained control of major rural parts of the country, and some of these groups have pledged their allegiance to ISIS. With that in mind, President Obama announced this week that he will leave nearly 10,000 U.S. troops in Afghanistan for almost the rest of his term to go after terrorists and train and advise the Afghans. Joining me to talk about the president's announcement is Tony Perry, San Diego bureau chief for the Los Angeles Times. Tony, welcome. So we've seen ISIS regain, or actually not regain, but take over major parts of Iraq since the U.S. troop withdrawal and the collapse of that country's security forces. Now in Afghanistan, we've seen the Taliban take over the major city of Kunduz. Given that situation, did President Obama really have any other choice but to leave U.S. troops in that country?
Well, he certainly listened to the pleas, really, of the Afghan leadership and the advice of his military leadership. And so he's backed off on one of his promises, which was to bring all the Americans, except for embassy personnel and security guards at the embassy, to bring all the American troops home by the end of his term. Not going to happen. Going to leave 9,800 for most of 2016 and then bring the number down to 5,500 either later in 2016 or maybe early in 2017. So the next president, be it Republican or Democrat, will inherit this war. Third president to and have the Afghan war on their plate, Bush, Obama, and whoever in 2017.
If the president hadn't made this decision, how ready were U.S., actually Afghan forces, to secure the country?
Pluses and minuses to that. You get different discussions. Taliban did take over Kunduz, major city, and there was about a 2-week fight. They were pushed out, and I think we're going to see a lot of that back and forth, back and forth. There are other areas, and they've shown the ability the Taliban have to strike in Kabul, in Kandahar, in Jalalabad, a number of places, and also, of course, across the border from Pakistan, where they have a sanctuary. So they've shown a robust capability. The United Nations issued a report that said the U.S. military has been too optimistic, and has also issued another report that says that Taliban is pretty much in control of about 15% of the country, which is the most they've controlled since 2001. So, as they say, the enemy gets a vote in war, and clearly the enemy here has voted to continue fighting and continue striking when and where they can.
So with those realities, despite public comments by the administration, was a full U.S. drawdown even an option?
Well, the president said it was, but it was never something, I think, favored by the U.S. military or the Afghan leadership. And so finally, the president had to make the fateful decision to go back on one of his most passionate promises to end both the war in Iraq, which he did, the U.S. involvement in one way in 2011. Now we're back with airstrikes and trainers, but not combat troops.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about that. So the president said America's combat mission in Afghanistan is over. Here's more of what he said.
While America's combat mission in Afghanistan may be over, our commitment to Afghanistan and its people endures. As Commander-in-Chief, I will not allow Afghanistan to be used as safe haven for terrorists to attack our nation again. Our forces therefore remain engaged in 2 narrow but critical missions: training Afghan forces and supporting counterterrorism operations against the remnants of al-Qaeda.
So, Tony, is that truly possible in a country as volatile as Afghanistan?
Or as large as Afghanistan, too. The 2 missions, the training, we've been doing a lot of training, and then the counterterrorism is a little opaque. What does that mean? Special forces in some ways? Certainly it means the drone strikes, which many of them, as we understand it, and we don't get a lot of information about the drone strikes, are out of Jalalabad, and we will continue to have forces there. So it is still a daunting task that 9,800 and soon to be 5,500 Americans are being asked.
So President Obama had wanted to bring both the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq to a full close. He hasn't been able to do that. Very quickly, how does that affect his legacy?
I don't think his legacy will be shaped by these two wars. I think the American public has checked out of these two wars. There isn't a draft. Nobody's sons are being drafted, or daughters, and sent to these wars. It'll be a minus, I would imagine, in the history books, but I don't see it as shaping what people think about the Obama presidency.
Okay, we have to close it there. Tony Perry, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
I'm Hari Srinivasan. On the next news hour, the story of 3 inmates continues as they strive to stay out of prison. That's Friday on the PBS NewsHour.
Oh, look at this. Baby Ai made her debut at the San Diego Zoo. Fadi is a rare animal from Madagascar, and she's 1 month old. The zookeepers checked her weight and health yesterday. The baby weighs 9 ounces, a sign the mother is doing a great job in caring for it. They're calling him the Hyatt Hound. Hotel guests found the tiny puppy wandering around the 10th floor of the Grand Hyatt in San Diego this week. Guests scooped up the puppy before elevator doors closed. How cute, in on him. The puppy was kept at the hotel for a couple of days after none of the guests claimed him. He ended up at the Rancho Coastal Humane Society. The German Shepherd mix is now in foster care and expected to be put up for adoption in about a month. A mild weekend on tap for San Diego. We're back into the more seasonal 70s along the coast. Likewise, 70s for the inland valleys. Even cooler if you're headed towards the mountains, maybe Julian with 60s. 90s and 80s back in the desert areas. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great weekend.